The Security Guards Forum has asked the Limpopo Premier, Dr Phophi Ramathuba, to insource those working at government buildings. It also wants the government to intervene to stop looming retrenchments after contracts were terminated. Let's speak about this with the Giwusa President, Mametlwe Sebei, and we might have joining us Sekhukhune security crisis and demand forum chairperson Mkhawane Banele a little bit later on. But thank you so much for coming on to us, Mametlwe. Let's start off with the problem at hand. There seem to be a couple of issues. One of those issues is contracts have been terminated?
Yes, I mean, these are outsourced services, mainly securities. And as you know that on average, those contracts are entered into between government and service provider on average for 3 years period. So what does it mean? It means that these workers can only ever have a job for 3 years because their contract is linked to the contract between their employer and the client, who is a government department, municipality, whatever institutions of government, but also in a number of instances, private institution. Right?
So when those contracts end, right,
yes,
then a new contractor comes in and he brings in his own lot of security guards.
And let's understand the implications of that. It means that these workers will never really build any sustainable livelihoods, right? Because I and you, we go to a bank to take a loan for a house, to take a loan for a car. All of these are on average loan or credit that exceed the period of 3 years. So these workers will never have houses, right? Will never be able to buy, cars. They'll never be able to buy lots of basic things, as all of us, one or the other, depends on credit. But the other issue is just also the flagrant abuse of rights of these workers because of their precarious, the precarious nature of their employment, their vulnerability, because what you are dealing with here is unscrupulous employers who even, particularly in the context of the two-pot system, they were found by, I think it's a financial services, a regulatory authority, right, for, financial services that did find that basically, many of the employers that were found to be deducting provident funds from workers but not paying them over to the relevant provident funds, right? These are security companies, right? But it's not just provident funds. It's also statutory deductions. Many of them don't have their workers registered for UIF, for compensation in a case of injury and disease on duty, and all of those things and so on. So there is just a flagrant abuse over and above a poverty wages that we are saying we want to challenge. Because many of these contracts, by the way, you see, on average, your security contract now will be costing government 20,000, 22,000, 23,000 per security guard. But the actual guard, the one who do the actual work, will be paid somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 in a best scenario on average, right?
So you're telling me that a security guard is paid 4, 5, call it 6,000 rand per month, right?
Yeah.
And the markup or the cost to government is an extra 15, 16, 17,000 above
Absolutely.
That
It's a very super exploitative regime of primitive accumulation. As I said to your colleague, you're dealing with a class of an aspirant capitalist who are without capital and rely on a very super exploitative and primitive methods of accumulating that have a markup that are outrageous by your own, I think, recognition. That's the problem.
So if you put this across to the Limpopo Premier and it does get buy-in, what does it cost to government from the current 4 or 5, 6,000?
Well, the reality is that, when we say that we demand a minimum wage of 15,000 rand, right? People are saying this thing is not affordable. And I said to them, actually, what we are offering is a discount, right, to government and to the taxpayers in this country. Because on the base of 15,000 rand, government will still be able to save and will argue they've got to be able to hire more people in some of these duties. They've got to be able to make sure that they set aside some of those monies to improve services to the working class, people and communities, right? So over and above, just saving society the headache of extortion, which actually has now been categorized as a national security threat, just because of the amount of violence that is involved in this kind of business of tendering and the racketeering extortions that is done by the so-called business forums, many of which are entrepreneurs who have a sense of entitlement. And what do they demand? In a final analysis, is a right to plunder the state, is a right to loot the public services, is a right to enslave many of these workers who are not only paid dismal, poor wages, but also are flagrantly abused, as well as basically stolen from. Because how else do you define what is happening where the money of Provident Fund is deducted from worker salary? It doesn't reach a Provident Fund administrator. The money of QUEDA, the money of UIF, it doesn't reach a relevant statutory bodies that are entrusted with these insurances in case of job loss, in case of disease and illness and so on. And that's the reason we say that we want permanent, we want insourced job, but also we want decent minimum wages. In our case, we say 15,000 Rand minimum wage.
How do you come up with 15,000 Rand?
Well, there was a report that was done recently by what we call a livable wage research group that showed that the amount by which a worker, right, supporting a family of 4 can be able to get by would require 15,000 Rand. They're not saying a living wage, a livable wage. The reality, Hugo, is that minimum wages and generally the wage formation in this country bears no relation whatsoever to the cost of living and the cost of social reproduction of workers, right? When you look at the food basket, and I mean, this month, the Peter Marispec Economic Justice and Dignity Group just released a report, I think yesterday, and it shows that that food basket has increased by 95%. It was 5,250, which is already way beyond what these workers are actually earning, right? And in addition to that, you've got to factor a cost of electricity, of water, of housing, of transport. And the estimations are that workers are on average spending about 2,500 to 4,000 on accommodation alone. And I'm talking about, townhouse or a suburb, house in a mansion in a suburb. I'm talking about a backyard room in Soweto, Mametlwe, but also just a single flat. That is the standard accommodation for your average worker. The cost of transport is estimated at 2,000 Rand a month when you consider a daily commute, but also of the students that are dependents of that work and so on. So I can go on and on. And the reality is many of these workers are struggling. And that's the reason, in a situation wherein many of them have to prioritize, right, electricity, but also transport, which they normally put first since they have no option on that. The same researchers have estimated workers are underspending on food by 52%. And how do they compensate for that?
I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, because we've got Sekhukhune, Security Crisis and Demand Forum Chairperson Mkhawane Banele on the line. Mkhawane, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. You've caught us straight in the middle of this conversation around the security guards, as you are well aware, and the push by your organisation to have these security guards insourced by government. Just walk us through what your argument is. Mkhawane, are you there? Okay, we seem to have lost him. We will come back to him as soon as we regain that connection. But I want to take you back a little bit. It's been about 3 years since the security guards were employed. So on the verge of the termination of this employment, you were raising your hand and saying, let us have them insourced. And the question would arise, where was the conversation a year ago, 2 years ago? Would it not have been more prudent to stop that conversation now and reduce the amount of pressure, so to speak, that you're putting on the Premier's office when this is the 11th hour?
No. Well, remember that I had a conversation with workers. I think Mr. Mahlache Dombitsika said that their contract is ending in November. But the workers, for instance, at I think it's Elias Motswadi, I'm told that their security contract is new. So remember, these are workers at different periods of their contracts. It's not one department, it's not even only government departments. Some are in municipalities, some are in clinics, some are in all sorts of institutions of government. So the issue of outsourcing has been on the agenda. The labor movement has never accepted outsourcing, labor broking, and casualization of labor since it began, particularly in the 90s with the neoliberal restructuring that was implemented and carried out by this government. So we never accepted that. As Giwusa in 2015 and 2016, we launched what we call #outsourcing must fall, where we fought bitter battles at universities, University of Pretoria, TUT, UOFs, number of institutions across the country, where we challenged. In many of the institutions, we won the struggle for insourcing. We won the struggle to make sure that those workers are on decent minimum wages of 10,000 rand. And we say that need to be extended across the entire public sector. And that remains our commitment, not only as Giwusa, but as SAFTU. And we are from a meeting today, as SAFTU, where we have said, we are going to take this battle, right? Alongside the issues around cost of living, the current amendments of labor laws that threatens what little in terms of rights and conditions have we achieved in the past decades. So we have been on this issue. We have never slept on duty. And we say that this conversation must be back on the agenda.
Like that, you haven't slept on duty. We've got a minute before we finish, or thereabouts, the conversation. But I want to touch a little bit on the safety of security guards. I mean, every day we are witnessing all sorts of crimes and security guards in the firing line. What sort of laws and rules are there to protect these security guards? Just how protected are they?
There's none. I mean, many of us, when we demand the right to safety, we actually say the bodies of these workers must be on the line, right? But whenever there's conversation about their conditions, nobody wants to listen. People buy into arguments, no, but they're not qualified, what sort of entitlements are. But I and you are on the studio conducting this conversation at night on the assumption that you are safe. Who is guaranteeing this safety? Is a security who is a human body that is vulnerable in a country with an extremely, high levels of violence, where actually murder rate exceed war zones, including, Ukraine. Number of people are murdered per year in this country than people that are dying on a yearly basis in Ukraine. That's how outrageous it is.
I'll stop you there because I believe we've got Mkhawane Banele on the line. Mkhawane, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm still available.
Yeah, we've got a couple of minutes left in the conversation. And as you've heard, some of the issues that the Giwusa president, Mametlwe Sebei, is talking about speaks to the safety of security guards. But the issue at hand really is the termination of these contracts and what you would like to see happen. Just walk us through what your position is.
Yeah, on the issue of retrenchment, that is why we are fighting right now. We are not happy because I'm the secretary of the Sekhukhune Security Crisis and Demand Fund. Also, the experience in security guards. I know what they are doing when they are retrenching us. The problem here, they are retrenching us and giving the job to the people who are not qualified, who are not trained to security guards, so that they can do whatever they like with them. And then now, what I can say, we are going to fight this better than 2016. Mr. Sebei just mentioned that in 2016 they fought this bitter. Then now it's going to be bitter than 2016. Why are I saying so? We are in that struggle. And then we are not happy with that situation where the service providers deduct money from the employees to Department of Labor, but they are not registering them. And the way they are doing so is because they are dodging the tax. So that is why now we are requesting the minimum of 15,000, meaning an individual is going to be taxed, then the economy of South Africa is going to grow. So that is what we are fighting for right now. Okay,
so final question. Let's talk about your strategy or your plan of action to ensure that these security guards, the number you haven't given us, if you just give us what the number is of security guards that are impacted, are going to remain employed.
Well, as I said, we are dealing with workers not working for one institution. So it's thousands and thousands of workers across the entire Limpopo province. But this is only where we are currently organized. We are reaching out, or we want to reach out to, security forums in Tshwane, where there have been major struggles there, and before here in Johannesburg, in KZN. We want to build a national campaign, not only of securities. We are inviting cleaners, we are inviting landscaping workers, we're inviting EPWP, we are inviting EPWP, community healthcare workers, all these workers that are in casual and precarious forms of employment, as well as other low-paid workers, to say we need to build a resistance against the onslaught on the conditions of employment. We want permanent, decent jobs. We want insourcing and the benefits that comes with it. We want 15,000 rand minimum wage. We want an economy that can work in the interest of the working class. On the basis of the regime that we're proposing, by the way, it's not going to destroy jobs. In fact, we are saying we want to give government a discount, right, on what they are paying per service provider. And we are saying that on that basis, it should be possible for government to create many more jobs. For instance, there is about 2.3 million security that are registered in this country. Only about half, a million of them are employed and so on. The reality is that many of these workers are overworked. And I had conversation with them, they're overworked and all those things and so on. And we want them to be able to have more time to spend with their families, but also we want them to be able to have more time to study and pursue other interests and so on. So the bottom line is that we are calling for a national campaign, we are mobilizing, but also we're saying this is linked with a struggle for service delivery, and we want communities also to join in support, and we'll be announcing plans. In Sekhukhune, we're convening mass meetings in the coming weekends to talk about contracts that are coming to an end.
I'm sorry we've run short of time, but
yes.
I think you've made your point, an interesting one at that, and we will continue to watch this conversation. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Excellent. Thank you.
In conversation with Giwusa President Mametlwe Sebei and Sekhukhune Security Crisis and Demand Forum Secretary via our video link, Mkhawane Banele, and that conversation around Security Guards Forum that has asked Limpopo Premier Dr Phophi Ramathuba to insource those working at government buildings.